And we're live. One mind, one world, people. Addy can hear. Addy ads. YouTube's chosen one. It's raining pretty hard today, and now it's quite beautiful out. Just woke up from a nap, and I want to speak on race and racialization because I don't think that I have fully clarified my thoughts on this publicly. So I wanted to do that. And I'll talk about my own experience with racism first. Growing up, growing up in the Midwest, um, in the state of Wisconsin, there are definitely racists there. I've definitely experienced racism growing up in school. Fortunately, it was never physical that I could remember. There was one time when it was very overt, but most of the time it was covert or extremely passive aggressive, which, although not physically harming, is still, I think, psychologically damaging to someone. And that overt incident, um, it happened when I was actually quite young. I was at a baseball game of my older cousin with my younger cousins. There are multiple cousins, and this kid just wanted to fight me, and I didn't understand why. Uh, I was I was confused. I didn't know what was going on. I was too young to really conceptualize what racism was. I think I was 9, and I still hadn't experienced it overtly like that. And my other cousin had to defend me because he was older and he understood what was going on. As far as school, though, it was mostly passive aggressive, racial epithets like dirty Mexican or some variant of the like. It was, you know, just the usual slurs against Mexicans. And fortunately, I never lost my cool in terms of physically retaliating, but I was resentful of white people um, for a bit because of that. And I used to be resentful of Germans too because of World War II. I used to be prejudiced against Germans. So I mean, there's that too, that I dealt with, and I just read more. Right, I read more about World War II and understood that, all war is bad. The Germans weren't pure evil because we are pure good. Yeah, Quadrex, go ahead, man. Message me. I also saw you, Judy. Judy Patootie. Thanks for checking in, and Quadrex. But nowadays, I mean, half my family's white. So when you're a mutt, you can't really be racist when you're mixed. I mean, you can, but it's kind of a form of self-hatred, isn't it? Which, unfortunately, there are some people like that. But I don't think people are realizing that they're being manipulated. And this has been going on for some time with the left, particularly because I think young people, I don't know what it is. Why I think it might be universally human, this desire to be recognized as a good person, even if that means, um, just not thinking for yourself. So do that. Since we're talking about race, I'll be a bunch of different colors. As far as racialization, I think this is a tactic, a strategy as well, that I think the media uses to try to apply the divide and conquer principle. And I say the majority of young people don't understand this. We don't have to racialize everything. You know, it's like sexualizing everything. Like, what? There's no need for that. You know, I noticed the other day is I think I'm pretty good at focusing on what the content of people are saying, but not necessarily how they're saying it, which I think is uncommon. I think most people are actually the opposite. In understanding that, you know, a lot of people, it's difficult for them, but you can practice, I think, and get better at it. So these media giants racialize everything, and it's working, man. It seems to be working, the dividing and the conquering. I just saw a video of two children bullying another child, two black children bullying a white girl. And the white girl was like, she looked like she was 5. And now you're seeing, you know, black people just attacking white people with, God, look, little dogs don't like my voice. You see black people attacking white people attacking black people. I mean, I just saw a black person attack an old person, an old lady. Dude. Probably not. And then it's just, and because they don't talk about it, it makes the righties, right, resentful. They're wondering why they're not mentioning this. What's up, Ba? And that only increases tension. That only increases, you know, the possibility for, you know, more prejudice to rise up. So this racialization of everything in America, man, I do think we have very deep systemic racial divides in this country. There's no doubt about it. I think it was Tolstoy. He said, if you want to see how civilized society is, take a look at their prisons. And this concept of looking at prisons as a representation for society and how they're treated, how prisoners are treated, I think is a good lens to view it. So, for example, in England, you have to stay, and I'm talking about the male prisons. I'm guessing the female prisons are similar in terms of area code grouping. It depends on your zip code, right, or your area code, regardless of what you look like, which is more evolved than the American way of thinking, right? I don't care if you're, no, I'm not condoning gang violence or being part of a gang, because I think that's absurd. It is kind of an absurd concept, though. Like, just because I was by chance born here, I'm going to join the other boys who were born here in gang activity. You know, that doesn't make any sense. Whereas in the States, it's, you know, you get smashed in prison for talking to the wrong race. Especially in California, Arizona, New York, these big penitentiaries and big state prisons as well. So my own my own subjective experience with racism in Wisconsin has been, you know, it's been a real thing. I think it's impossible to grow up as a minority in this country and not experience some sort of prejudice. I mean, regardless of, I think everybody's experienced prejudice. Women experience, women are judged in the workplace on two or three parameters or more that men just don't have to deal with. Men have to deal with society not really giving a shit about them until they can contribute money. So on and on. Everybody has privileges. Everybody has prejudices that they deal with. But on the whole, I don't think it's happening like more often than not. It doesn't seem to be. And when I was young, I remember not being able to see race when I was in kindergarten. And it was fascinating thinking about it when I was younger. I could remember that experience more than now. It's much harder to remember what that felt like. So again, I think discussing these topics is so important because speaking on myself, and I know this applies to other people because this is the way humans are. You have to release that info. Humans are social animals and gravitate to groups. Yeah, exactly. Everybody needs to be part of a group. And that's why I love this channel, because there's a group forming that I think we're all, you guys are pretty smart and care about, higher level self-actualization, both on a personal level and a global level. But speaking about it, I think is so important, because if not, it just makes resentment and it festers, right? And this happened to me when I was younger. And I spoke a little bit about this in college, how I was afraid to just discuss my thoughts on politics because I knew that some of them were not what most young people, believe or think as far as college goes. And I think the Democrats use it as a weapon. They use racialization as a weapon. They racialize everything that they can to try to manipulate minorities, principally, I think. But I think they're waking up to it. Not everything has to be about race. And there's a lot about race in America. I do believe there are Nazi gangs in the police. I believe that 100%. Do I think it's the majority of the police? No. That doesn't mean I trust police, or they're not a criminal organization, because I believe they are a criminal organization. Anybody who protects criminals, I think, should be classified as a criminal. Anybody who partakes in criminal activity, according to the RICO Act, everybody's guilty. So, it's a completely criminal organization. That being said, I don't think most of them are necessarily racist. I think it's more so about power and wielding that power and authoritarianism. Wielding that power and authoritarianism. And this is something that I actually learned from Mr. Dawson. And he explained it like this: regardless if it's fascists or communists or whoever it is, whatever radical group, it's government. It's authoritarianism that is a common link. And if they can use race to achieve those ends, those power ends, those authoritarian ends, of course they will do that. George Webb calls it the triumph of the will. And I need to read more about that concept. But the way I think about it is the will to power. Friedrich Nietzsche. And this is another thing that I think is really hard for people to understand. Something like the will to power, especially young people, is understanding that there is darkness in the world, and that's scary, and there's darkness that cannot be understood, and that's the scariest kind. You know, what do you do to a man who has nothing to lose? You can't really do anything. But as far as the racialization and authoritarianism goes, we don't need to racialize everything. Yes, I have experienced discrimination in my home state, no less. And it did make me resentful for, I would say, several years. And I mentioned before, I used to be resentful of Germans because of World War II. I was very resentful of Germans. And I just learned more. I opened my mind and learned and read more. I did more reading. And I realized that all war is bad. The United States aren't good guys because we defeated the Nazis. We teamed up with the Nazis. We protected Claus Barbie. If that's not disgusting, I don't know what is. So I think my final point that I want to end on is, despite the fact that I have experienced racism personally, I had to deal with my prejudice myself and process it and understand that the minority does not constitute the majority. Just because a few white kids in Wisconsin are racist to me doesn't mean most white people are racist to me, or most white people are prejudiced against me. And it's up to the responsibility of the people, especially once you become an adult. You have to process those negative feelings of prejudice yourself and get through them and not harbor them. Pepsi Watson says, I forgive you for me, not for you, which I really love. And that really, I think that's so powerful, and it made me, it kind of blew my mind. It made it way easier for me to forgive people. Yeah, we call Illinois people fibs, Judy, in Wisconsin. It's just a joke, though. I don't have personal, grievances towards Illinois people. But another thing is Minnesota drivers. Minnesota driving is pretty infamous. So I just want to end on that, is forgiveness towards people who were, prejudiced towards you, racialized towards you, and understanding that, we don't have to be manipulated by the media into hating. See, that white guy just waved at me in his truck. We don't have to be manipulated. We shouldn't be manipulated into hating women, into women hating men, whites against blacks, blacks against whites, and understanding that the biggest enemy is actually the media, I think will help us all. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe. Stay frosty. Cheers. Until next time, people.